Hello and welcome to Peaky Boardgamer. My name is Ariosa and in today's video I will teach you how to play the game Role Player, a game for 1 to 4 players designed by Matejka and was brought to us by Thunderworks games. When I bought this game, I thought that I was buying a game in which I will be controlling a hero, entering dungeons and fighting monsters, but no, this is not about that. This is about character creation of a hero before he enters his role-playing adventure, which is not included in the game. However, after playing this game, I was so not disappointed. Let's move to the table and see how the game is played. At first, place all the dice into the bag, give it a shuffle and place the bag at one side of the table. Randomly choose one of the players to be the starting player, and then in a clockwise direction, each player takes one of the character sheets. These boards are double-sided, players may choose any side, they're both the same. Players will now pick their class, their backstory and their alignment using the following process. There are 6 class cards, many backstory cards and many alignment cards. First, players pick their class. The 6 class cards are all connected to one color. Class cards also give the players a special power that can be used throughout the game. Starting with the first player and then in a clockwise order, each player draws a random die from the bag and takes the corresponding class card, returns the die back into the bag and chooses one of the 2 classes contained into the card onto the class area of the board. At this moment, the player takes the 2 markers that correspond to the color of the class, place one of the cubes on top of the class and the other one at the side for the moment. Now it's time for the next player to pick their class by drawing another random die. If a player draws a yellow die or a color that is already taken by another player, then the die returns to the bag and the player picks another die. After each player has picked their class, each player is dealt a random backstory card and a random alignment card, which are placed in the dedicated spaces on their board. Leftover class, backstory and alignment cards return back in the box. The second marker cube is then placed in the middle space of the alignment card. Players start the game with some gold. Moving clockwise, the first and the second player starts with 5 gold, the third player starts with 6, and if there were a fourth player, they would start with 7 coins. The rest of the coins is placed in a general supply. Again in a clockwise order, players take their starting dice from the bag. These are equal to the number of players plus 4, so in my 3 players example, each player will draw 7 random dice from the bag. After players roll their dice, they must place them in attribute slots in their character sheet. Characters have 6 attributes with 3 dice slots each. When placing dice into the attribute slots, the only restriction is that you must fill the first slot of an attribute first before moving to the second and before moving to the third one. Important! During the game, whenever players add yellow dice into their attributes, they gain 2 gold coins as a bonus. Also, whenever players complete an attribute by placing a third die, again they gain a coin as a bonus. So, in my situation, I will gain 4 gold coins for my 2 yellow dice and another one for completing my dexterity, and that makes 5 gold coins. These here are initiative cards numbered from 1 to 5. You will need the cards that are up to your player count plus 1, so in my 3 players example, I will not need this card, I need cards numbered from 1 to 4. Initiative cards are also double-sided, one side depicts a coin and the other one doesn't. You will need to flip these cards so that all cards depict a coin except the first and the last. Then add 1 coin to cards depicting the coin symbol. Now it's time to create the market using the market cards. Before shuffling them, separate them to 1 dot and 2 dot stacks and then shuffle each stack separately. Now, if you are playing with 3 players, as in my example, you need to discard 3 cards from each one of the piles. If you play with 2 players, then 7 cards from each one of the piles, but if you play with 4 players, then you don't need to discard anything. With the discarded cards, create a discard pile, then place the 1 dot pile on top of the 2 dot pile, and finally deal 1 market card on top of each initiative card. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have just created the market. Finally create a supply with the 6 charisma tokens next to the market, and the game is now ready to start. The game is about creating a powerful character for an RPG game as efficient as possible. Efficiency is measured as to how well the player did in objectives imposed by the class, the backstory, and the alignment card. Also, equipment that is gained during the game will possibly grant the players more stars, which is victory points in this game. The game is played over a series of rounds. During each one of these rounds, players will add one more die into their attributes, and then, if they have enough gold, they can go on and buy more equipment. At the end of the round, in which players will fill the last attribute slot on their sheets, the game will end and players count their scores. Each round in this game consists of 4 phases: roll phase, the dice phase, the market phase, and the cleanup phase, which prepares for the next round. Let's see each one of these phases in greater detail. In the roll phase, the starting player draws dice from the bag equal to the number of initiative cards in the game and then rolls them. Then the player must place these dice onto each one of the initiative cards in an ascending value order. The die with the least value has to be placed in the first initiative card, the next higher value to the second card, and so on and so forth. If there are multiple dice with the same value, then the starting player decides how to place these dice among the initiative cards. In the dice phase, starting with the first player and then in a clockwise order, each player does the following steps. The player first chooses one of the initiative cards and takes it next to his play area. If there is a coin on this card, the coin is placed to the player's personal supply. Now the player must place this new die to one of his attributes. Each one of the attributes is connected to a special power which is the same for all character sheets. After the player places the die, the corresponding attribute power instantly takes effect and can also target the die just placed. When placing a die in strength, the player may choose any one of their dice and flip it to the exact opposite side. When placing a die in dexterity, the player may swap the positions of any 2 of their dice, without changing their face value, of course. When placing a die in constitution, the player may decrease the value of one die by 1 point and increase the value of another die by 1 point as well. Important, you can never increase a 6 value die and you can never decrease a 1 value die. When placing your die in intelligence, you may re-roll any one of your dice and place it again in the same place. Remember that the player may choose to keep the original value instead of the value just rolled. When placing a die in wisdom, the player may move his alignment marker 1 space orthogonally, so I could move my marker towards chaotic. Finally, when placing a die in charisma, the player gains 1 charisma token that may be used in the upcoming market phase. Don't forget bonus coins gained by placing yellow dice or by filling the last attribute space. After all players take an initiative card and place the die onto their sheets, the game proceeds to the next phase, the market phase. The market phase is played in a player order determined by the taken initiative cards from the previous phase. Using this player turn order, players must select one of the market cards and then either pay the cost in coins depicted in the top right corner of the cards, or discard the card and gain 2 coins from the supply. In our example, this player plays first and selects the longsword. Then the player chooses to discard the longsword in order to gain 2 coins from the supply. Now that player returns the initiative card back in the center of the table, and now it's that player's turn. When buying cards, players may use their charisma tokens to gain a discount of 1 coin for each charisma token they use. Now it's time to say a little more about cards. There are 4 different types of cards, and when equipped, they are placed in specific areas around the player board. We have weapon cards, armor cards, trait cards, and skill cards. Starting with weapons, these cards grant the player with permanent bonuses that are constantly in effect throughout the game. However, characters have only 2 hands, and weapons are either one-handed or two-handed, like this crossbow here. So players can either have 2 one-handed weapons or 1 two-handed weapon. Players may always discard their previous weapons in order to equip a new one. For the rest of the card types, there is no limit in how many cards a player may have. Armor cards work differently. Players are trying to collect parts of a specific set in order to gain more victory points at the end of the game. Trade cards grant the players with victory points at the end of the game if they accomplish specific goals that are written on them. Important: the moment players equip a new trade card, they must move the alignment marker one space if possible. The direction of this movement is depicted in the top right corner of the card next to the price value. In this case, I would have to move my alignment marker one space upwards. Last, we have skill cards. Skill cards grant players abilities that they may use by tapping them. Players may use their untapped skills whenever applicable, even during another player's turn, but also at the moment the player equips the new skill. Important: all these skill cards require a movement of the alignment marker. This move, however, must be performed, otherwise we may not use the skill. So in my case, I cannot use Cure Wounds because I cannot move my alignment marker higher any further. Open Lock, however, requires a downward movement, so if I play Open Lock first, then I can also use Cure Wounds because now I can move it higher. After all players have returned their initiative cards, we move to the cleanup phase. In the cleanup phase, all players may untap one of their skill cards. And if they have a charisma token that was not used during the last market phase, they have to return it to the supply. The starting player returns the last die back to the bag and discards the last card from the market. Then the player refills the market with new cards from the stack. If this is not possible because the stack is depleted, then we reshuffle all cards together to form a new stack, and then the drawing of cards continues. Then the starting player adds coins to the middle cards if they don't already contain one. The bag with the dice is then passed to the next player, who will be the starting player for the following round. If during a round players fill all their attribute slots with dice, then at the end of the current round's market phase, skip the cleanup phase and move straight to scoring. In scoring, players score stars in 6 different categories that are all depicted in the bottom right corner of the board. The first category is attribute goals that are depicted in the class card of the player. If the attributes achieved by the player fall within the requirement of the card, then player gains the number of stars depicted to the right. Each attribute is equal to the sum of the dice values plus or minus any modifiers depicted to the right of the attribute. For example, my strength attribute is equal to 14, which is within the required range depicted on the card, so I will gain 2 stars for that. If the target is a specific number, then the player has to reach this number spot on. For example, Constitution requires me to reach 18 points. I have currently 15 points, plus 2 as a modifier, 17, so I don't get the 4 stars. If the target is a number and a plus, then a total value equal or above this target would be enough to score the stars. In the next step, players score 1 star for each die they have placed that is the same color as their class. My class is green. I have placed 4 green dice, so I gain 4 stars for that. Next, players gain or lose stars depending on where their marker has stopped at the end of the game. My marker has stopped in a -1 space, so I lose 1 victory point. In the next step, players score stars based on how well they did according to their backstory card. Backstory cards require specific dice colors in 6 specific attribute slots. I have achieved 4 out of 6, so I will gain 3 stars. Achieving 2 to 3 out of 6 grants the player only 1 star, and if a player achieves all 6 out of 6, the player gains 6 stars. Next, we move to armor scoring. I have managed to collect 2 parts of a specific set, and I will gain 3 victory points. Also, I gain 1 bonus point because me who wears this armor is either green or blue class. Finally, players collect victory points if they satisfy the requirements depicted in their trait cards. Foolish card gives me 2 stars if either my intelligence or my wisdom attribute is 8 or less. Weak is the same for strength or constitution, and honest gives me 3 victory points for each column in my character sheet that has 4 or more dice of the same color, so I will gain 3 victory points because of that card. The player who collected the most stars is the winner of the game. In case of a tie, use gold coins as a tiebreaker. If there is still a tie, then the tied player that has the least dice of the corresponding class color is the winner. If the tie still exists, then all tied players share their victory. And that was the video for Keith Matejka's Role Player, a very funny and interesting dice game. If you like our videos and want to see more videos like that, please subscribe to my channel, and until next time, have fun and play more board games.